There's nothing that annoys me more than when people say they're not artistic enough to make good 2D art, or feeling like somebody's keeping you from making 2D art because they know how to sketch and they feel like you should know how to sketch and you should know how to paint. Well, something I want to show you, and I'm going to do this with a Call of Duty recreation. I'm going to make Call of Duty 2 into Call of Duty 2D. One of the things I want to show you is how simple it is to make 2D art. You can see here that I'm just using very basic colors. In fact, I'm only using about 3 or 4 colors here. I mean, I'm using different shades of it, making it lighter and darker and more saturated. But you can see at the top left-hand corner here, I've got a gradient from light bluish gray to dark green, and then also this little brown bridge here. As you can see, I'm just using very basic shapes, using the polygon lasso tool, and also just these stamps of squares that I've created. They're really brushes, but I like to call them stamps because that's kind of how I treat them. I just sort of stamp on different layers here. As you can see, we're sort of having a gradation coming towards the camera. We've got this grayish light blue in the background, and then coming towards the camera becomes more saturated and more green. And I'm just color picking from that gradient at the top left-hand corner. Now I'm using the stamps that I've created for grass, just sort of stamping them on each layer. Notice how everything is very silhouetted right now. And that's because I want the abstract to look great. If it looks good in the abstract, if it looks kind of like a very simplistic photograph, and it kind of looks real in a strange, simplistic way, we're definitely on the right track. I don't like adding detail until it looks great in the abstract. That means the colors make sense, the depth makes sense, and things just look realistic if you blur your eyes and zoom out. I think that's a really effective technique to use when you're creating 2D art. Just zoom out, blur your eyes, and if it looks like a photograph, you're definitely on the right track. By the way, guys, you can take your artwork and using the link below, it's my totally free 2D game kit. You could take that game kit, combine it with your artwork, and have a 2D game inside of Unity pretty fast, a lot faster than if you had to build your game from scratch. This is my free 2D game kit below. I used this game kit to make a game for PewDiePie in 14 days. I've also remade BioShock, I remade Skyrim with this game kit, Cyberpunk. So if you're interested in downloading that, it's totally free, there's no gimmicks. Just click below, I'll send it to your email, and you can use it however you want. You can make a game and make $1 million off that game, or maybe just make personal projects. I really don't care, it's my treat to you. Click below to download that game kit. Things look good in the abstract, so I'm going to start adding some detailing here. Just using some very basic shapes. Again, I'm a big fan of basic shapes. Honestly, I'm kind of creating 2D art the same way a 3D modeler might create 3D art, using very basic shapes and slowly making them more and more detailed. Right here, I'm just using rectangles to create the power lines, and I love the gradient tool. You'll see me use the gradient tool a lot when I'm creating my artwork. I'm simply using the gradient tool to make it look like there's drop shadows on everything. Also, I'm a big fan of Noun Project. You've seen me use this in previous projects. Right now, I'm using this very simplistic tall tree from Noun Project. And Noun Project is an awesome plugin. It's very cheap subscription. You can just put the plugin inside of Photoshop and use it to create these tall, spindly trees. I'm also using Noun Project to create some fences here, just very simple fences, making some of them look a little bit more broken, a little bit slanted, and now I'm just adding very subtle details here. Now, don't underestimate the value of foreground elements. I've talked about this before. If you want your game to pop, and this is especially true with like Hollow Knight, if you want your game to pop, if you want it to have a lot of depth and feel moody, add a dark foreground and just start adding details in the foreground. This is especially important and very beautiful when you've got a parallax effect, and that means the foreground moves faster than the camera itself. Now that all the layers are generally created, the colors make sense, I'm going to start adding in some fog. I usually do this with my artwork about halfway through. What I'll do is I'll actually put fog behind the ground the player can walk on and just slowly adjust it to every single layer. Because often I underestimate how much detail the ground the player can walk on actually has, and it starts blending in with the background. What you don't want to do with 2D games is you don't want the ground the player can walk on to blend with the background because, well, the player's not going to know what they can jump on, especially if you're creating a platformer. In this case, I'm not too worried about the background blending with the ground, but I did want to make it look a little bit more distant, and also I just wanted it to look more like Call of Duty 2, which is Call of Duty 2 has a ton of fog, it's very moody, it looks like obviously a wartime game, so it looks like there's a lot of smoke. Here I'm just adding some details, zooming into the very basic shapes and starting to cut out. I do this again about halfway through the piece of art, and I just start cutting out very simple squares, rectangles, sometimes triangles from these basic shapes. Again, if you start with basic shapes, once you're about halfway through your piece of art, you can realize, oh, you know what, I can zoom in and start adding details to these basic shapes. The human eye is really good at thinking that everything is detailed. But subconsciously, we actually see very basic abstract shapes. The world around us is very simplistic. It's not necessarily the detail that makes things look good. It's actually the very basic smooth shapes, the circles, the squares. So you want to focus on those. And I'm even doing that here with the sandbags. The sandbags are just a simple pill shape, a rounded rectangle, and I just stacked them on top of each other, added an inner shadow, a gradient. So everything in this scene is just a very basic shape. Practicing with those basic shapes and then slowly adding detail and fog and lighting really will make things pop. But it's those basic shapes at the very beginning that are the foundation of this entire piece of art. Now I'm actually throwing in some textures that I downloaded from the Unity Asset Store. This is a fairly pricey pack of textures, but it's so valuable because you can just throw it into the project and make things look a little bit more realistic.
Welcome to basic training, comrades. If you wish to survive, you will do exactly as I say. Now, walk over to that table and pick up those weapons.
Alright, I'm creating the protagonist now. Just a very simple silhouette that I got off of Noun Project. Now I'm adding some shading, added a gun and a helmet, and just very subtly adding these very simplistic shades. It's very important that your artwork, that your protagonist, that your character matches the simplistic world that he's surrounded by. Most indie developers, when they're starting out, they spend so much time creating a detailed 2D character, but the problem is that when the camera zooms out, the character looks way too detailed and the world is much more simplistic. So you can see here I've tried my best to create a very simplistic character with subtle details that make him look iconic and make him look like a soldier. Now I'm just adding some blood particle effects, some bullets, and also some blood splatter. I found this on Noun Project's plugin, and this is something that I'm going to do mainly for concept art purposes. Inside of Unity, what you would do, and Unity is the software we would actually throw this piece of art into, what you would do in Unity is you would use the particle system. The same is true with the rain here. I'm just making a simple concept to see what the rain might look like, what the sun shafts might look like. But you would do the sun shafts and the rain with a particle system in Unity, and that's the built-in particle system that's proprietary to Unity. Now I'm just adding some subtle effects, some basically post-processing effects inside of Photoshop to get an idea of what this piece of art might look like. If you're bringing this artwork into Unity, and maybe you're using my 2D game kit to bring your art into Unity, you would ultimately use a post-processing effect and you would get this look. And that's just the post-processing effects that Unity has to offer. This is ultimately what Call of Duty 2 would look like as a 2D game. Thanks for watching, guys. If you want to see more videos like this, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and also just remember you can download my free 2D game kit. You can take artwork just like this, put it into my 2D game kit. I'm going to save you a ton of time. It's totally free. You can use it however you want. Download it below. It is my treat to you. I'll talk to you guys later. Cheers.